I'm currently on the phone with Taylor Streiff. He's another musician that reached out about the current interview session. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the chance to introduce himself.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Yeah, Taylor Streiff here. I'm a piano player. Grew up in St. Louis, lived in Chicago for a few years, then made my way back here in 2019 and took a little break there for a bit, just playing out. And I've been playing out professionally almost every weekend now for about 3 years in a row. So it's been nice to get back at it and be a part of the music scene in St. Louis, Missouri.
Awesome. That's great. Congratulations. So with these interviews, I always like to kind of figure out what makes a musician tick. So give me some details about when you first came in contact with music and what about it do you feel really connected with your personality?
Sure. So grew up with a piano in the house. My mom always played, so that was a really, really she's not a professional by any means, but she always played the piano that was in the house. So that was like a really, really inspiring thing for me, just to see, your own mom doing that. And I guess really what made me tick with it was the fact that I could like sit down at the piano and push something, and make a sound with it. And I always, that's kind of hard to do for kids when with some other instruments. I mean, you can kind of strum a guitar. But I would feel like piano and like drums are two things where it's like, yeah, I just do something and it makes a sound. And so, really what it was just really inspiring, at least to see my mom doing it. And then eventually I just, wanted to play and, started taking lessons probably when I was like 7, 8 years old. And then I actually backed off a little bit. Didn't play for a while there and then got back into it when I was like 15, 16. And that's really when it started to take off for me.
So this might be kind of an obvious question, but do you feel like you encountered any resistance from your family or your mom when you decided that you also wanted to play piano? I mean, I'm sure she was supportive of it, but sometimes that's not always the case.
Sure. Well, no, I definitely got pushed back. I came from a upper middle class, pretty well-to-do family, and they're giving me every opportunity to succeed in other areas of my life, and I decided that I wanted to either be a musician or be a chef, and they were pretty, adamant about not letting me do either of those things. At first, and then I did. I just kept. I went through all the audition processes of all the schools that I went and applied for, music schools, and I think after that, and they did see how passionate I was. It was sort of like, okay, just let them try this, and we're the safety net in case it doesn't go as planned. And I definitely got some pushback, and. But at the end of the day, I ended up in Chicago, studying music, and that ended up being a really, really rewarding thing. But also, showing my parents, hey, I'm dedicated to this. I'm dedicated to being in the practice room, 4 or 5 hours a day, trying to get good grades in all my music classes, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was pushback for sure.
So let's talk a bit about that struggle of learning the instrument and then getting comfortable with it. From what you described, it sounds like you took a bunch of private lessons. Did you also kind of study on your own for like learning contemporary music kind of this stuff?
Yes, absolutely. So when I think I alluded to the fact that I had lessons early on. I took lessons till I was about 8 years old to about 13 years old, like pretty consistently. And then I gave it up. I was a jock. I wanted to be a baseball player. and I would play a little bit here and there, but I just never really could like make that leap from like playing pretty much just straight up classical music to popular music. And I somehow just started teaching myself basic chord progressions that you hear, 1, 6, 4, 5, or, a blues progression, stuff like that. And, the basic keyboard theory was still under my hands. And I was making things sound good just because I could, I could just hear that kind of stuff and the way that it went. So I had some musicality there, but I remember the first time I had like a real lesson with a real like jazz pianist. I was like 15, 16 years old. And the guy's name is Michael Silverman, and he's still in town in St. Louis. Runs a amazing record company called not Wyndham Hill. Sorry, Autumn Hill. Wyndham Hill is its own thing, but Autumn Hill is what he is his name of his record label. But anyway, he was teaching me, and he goes, "Man, you sound good, but you look rough." meaning that my technique was terrible. And I can assure you that even now, people would see me play and they're like, "He's interesting technique." And it's like, well, it's a mix of like the classical stuff I've learned and the stuff that I do, the sort of my own style of playing. And so, I think the biggest problem I had for sure in music school, and I was at Columbia College in Chicago, big multimedia art school. The biggest hurdle I had there was, well, I have two of them. One was being my technique, obviously, and two was being just a well-rounded musician. I went into that school thinking I was just going to be a songwriter and a producer. And when they told me I had to pick an instrument, I didn't want to do singing. That was my only other medium. So I was like, well, of course, I'm a piano player. But I felt like I was miles behind. I didn't have a jazz music program like a lot of kids did in high school that are going to these types of music schools and stuff. And, I just felt behind. I felt like I really had to catch up in a lot of different ways. And I could play, in a band pretty well. But in terms of being a solo pianist or like even a concert pianist or anything like that, I was miles behind. Couldn't play any jazz. I could fake it pretty well, but I couldn't like actually play changes. There's a lot of theory I was way behind on, a lot of just harmonically and even like just like on the keyboard, I was just so behind. And so I really had to dedicate myself to about 5 hours a day of just strict like playing. In addition to all the homework and all that other, all the other hoops you got to jump through while you're in school.
Sure. So let's talk about kind of the next steps there. Once you kind of overcame those challenges through college, what did participating in music look like for you after college?
Okay, so one really cool thing about the degree that I got, and I did graduate from Columbia, and part of that degree was, they put you in all these scenarios while you're playing in these ensembles that make you hireable once you leave. So you're a hireable musician once you complete that 4 or 5 years that you're in college. And I was in jobbing bands, meaning, wedding bands, kind of stuff like that. And man, that paid well, but it was so like unfulfilling for me soulfully and like spiritually. I was just like, there's something that doesn't really get me when I play, Bruno Mars every weekend.
Right.
And the only really sort of like improv, like only music that I played at the time that had an improvisational aspect, I was playing a lot of like what I guess some people would call soul jazz, sort of Ramsey Lewis, kind of. I would say you put Ramsey Lewis or who am I thinking of right now? It doesn't really matter. Or like you could say Booker T, those kinds of keyboard players. That's the kind of music I was playing when I could improvise. And I was playing some Chicago blues as well. And then that's when, I had an opportunity to audition for a prominent Chicago blues guitarist named Nick Moss. And he had a string of really, really impressive traditional Chicago blues records where I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to learn how to play like that. And, really respect the tradition, all of that kind of stuff. And I ended up going on tour with him for 7 years. And my first 2 years, it was, I'll be honest with you, it was a learning curve. It was rough because at that time he was trying to sort of rebrand himself as sort of like almost like a jam rock Warren Haynes government mule type thing.
Sure.
And so I signed up for that because I was like, okay, cool, I get to do that. But then where the learning curve was definitely with the traditional blues aspect of things, because like we would play this big jammy rock kind of situation, and then all of a sudden he drops into like the heaviest slow blues like you've ever heard, and I'm like, oh god, like how do I do this? And this is a dude that had gotten to play with members of Muddy Waters band, and so I'm learning as I'm doing this. It's sort of like my graduate degree in a way, but getting I'm getting just just it was really, really hard for me to try to grasp that vocabulary and that way of playing. And I don't know how to explain it, but like 1 year and one day it just clicked. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm playing some real Chicago blues piano now. Like I don't know
Sure.
how it happened, but it just sort of all fell into place. All of the things that I had been working on finally just kind of came together. It was like a light bulb.
That's awesome. I mean, that's kind of those realizations that you kind of get to after you think you've plateaued and you're trying to reach that next level, and then it's just like a light
Absolutely.
bulb moment.
For
Awesome.
sure.
So, tell me about the next steps there, where now you're gigging every weekend, you're consistently able to pull in money making music.
Yeah. So I was going through some health issues at the end of my time in that band. Um, I was with the Nick Moss band, like I said, 7 years, and I was 30 years old at the time, and I had a big drinking problem. I'll be honest with you there, and I was like, really struggling just to make ends meet while living in Chicago. And I decided, hey, I need to do something. Quitting drinking was not, of course, the first thing on my list, but but I ended up moving back to St. Louis, and I was like, I'm gonna kind of just reevaluate things. So I left that band, and immediately when I got back to St. Louis, I had some connections here, but not a ton. But it's about in fall of 2019, and I started gigging again, and then COVID just sort of killed everything for a minute there, the lockdown, and so it gave me an opportunity to sort of again reset. And then that's kind of when I started also beginning like my sobriety journey as well, and that's a whole other thing. But at the same time, I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, like how do I start gigging again? And um, I had opportunities to play, and so my name was sort of out there in the scene in St. Louis. But it wasn't until I did go to treatment and for alcohol abuse, and when I got out of that, everything started. It was just odd. It was like suddenly I get sober, I stop drinking, I stay sober, and things just started falling into place. I had a drummer friend who was like, hey, I got a bass player friend, let's do this piano trio thing you've been talking about. And I was like, cool, we'll do that. And then within the span of, I swear, in like 3 months, I was gigging regularly with the piano trio. I got a call from a guy named Ivis John, who is a great blues guitar player and great singer and songwriter as well. He's based out of Cape Girardeau. He called me and was like, "Hey, just do a couple gigs." And then after those couple gigs, he was like, "I'm just going to keep sending you dates." Just
Nice.
kept it. That's been happening for like 2 years, and that's almost every weekend where I get to go out and play with him. Whether it's in the St. Louis area or kind of down in Southern Illinois or stuff like that. That stuff's been so fun. And yeah, man. I mean, it's been a blast. But again, it's been a lot of just like trying to just put myself out there and be like, hey, I'm here. I'm healthy. Uh, you know, give me a chance. I think really what helped too, I forgot to mention this. One thing that really helped me kind of get on the scene, at least in St. Louis. I've been friends with the guys from the Mighty Pines for a bit, and they helped me out. I think it was Halloween of 2021. They were going to do the 90s, like a big 90s show on Halloween, and they asked me to do it, and I think that helped out a fair amount as well. And I get to do it again this year on New Year's Eve. Shameless plug, but yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, for the most part, I think that is what a lot of musicians are looking for, is just the opportunity to get out and play every weekend.
Absolutely, and I'm really grateful and lucky to do that. And like even as we're talking right now, I've got I think I've got Thursday, Friday, Saturday all booked, and I can't, and I can't ask for anything more.
Very cool. And also, congratulations again on that, because I know a lot of people would love to be in that situation. So
Sure.
it's good to talk to somebody that has made that a reality.
Yeah.
So tell me about what you kind of see for yourself going forward and into the future. Where would you like to see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
Sure, sure. So it's interesting because like I really feel like the piano trio thing, it's only been kind of together for a couple years now, and really we have yet to sort of. I mean, we do play a lot of private events, but I'm trying to get it like sort of a consistent situation where I'm playing some sort of wedding or a corporate event or something like that. And again, we're just background music. We're not playing, I'm not pretending to be Elton John up there. you know, but but we do it pretty well, and we do a lot of that kind of like what I was saying was like almost soul jazz, a lot of blues, a lot of just sort of like good, like I don't want it to cross over into like that sort of like smooth jazz territory because I don't think that's what we do at all. but but some people could hear it and think that, but that's definitely not what we do. And but in any case, yeah, I want that to be a little more consistent, and want to get an album out with that project at some point. I really do love playing with Ivis every weekend. But even then, like, if I'm going to be honest with you, like it's a great passion project for me, and it's a job. Don't get me wrong, like it does pay, but I haven't seen any sort of like sort of, at least from, I don't want to speak for Ivis himself, but I haven't seen like a will to like get in the studio with that group. So yeah, I just am like I'm sort of like, okay, that's up to you, man. It's not my it's not my call. I'm just the piano player. And then I've thought about what a situation would look like if I were to ever go on tour again, and just in terms of just like my health, mental and physical. I do have some boundaries there, and it has to be a very very good and ideal sort of situation for me to ever get back out on the road. Um, yeah, and those days of, hey, let's pile in a van and sleep on the floor, and you know, yeah, yeah, I did that, and I'm sort of like, I don't think I could do it again. and
I
and
get it.
I've had some offers, where that's just what they tell me is going on, and I'm like, okay, so, well, do we have an itinerary and stuff like that? Do we have a tour manager? Do we have, any sort of road help or any of this? Or is this just like it was when I was in my 20s, which is, loading all my own gear all the time? And I, of course, next to drums, picked the heaviest instrument possible and most cumbersome. So it kind of is what it is. But again, like, I would love to go on tour again, but again, I think it would be like a really, really, it'd have to be a really, really ideal situation. And maybe my standards are just a little too high. but at the same time, I'm like, I, I really do feel like I put the work in for the last 15 years or so to really, oops, sorry about that. Yeah, I do have to put the work in, or I have put the work in, and I still do on a daily and weekly basis to to do something like that. I mean, I've got friends, man, from college that, again, sorry about that. I've got friends where they're touring with really really cool people. Um, I got my best friend Drew plays with Marcus King, um, and is on like a duo tour right now with him, just the two of them playing acoustic stuff. And then he's like his slide guitarist in his band. I got another guy that was my roommate in Chicago. This guy's named Paris. He played with Harry Styles. I mean, it's stuff that I look at and I'm like, man, I really envy that. But maybe it's just not my time yet. And again, all I do is just continue to do the next right thing, and to sort of just practice and stay within myself and continue to make good, honest music. Maybe something like that will present itself. So that's just where I'm at with that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great place to be in, and a good goal to have set for yourself is to find that sort of situation. So where can people find you and check you out, and then see when you might be around them?
So, like I said, I play with the Ivis John Band. So there's ivisjohnband.com, which has all of our dates on it, and those are updated pretty regularly. Right now, we're not playing. My piano trio is not playing anything public until the spring, and in the spring, probably March or April of 2025. We'll be starting up our residency again. We've had this residency for a while, but anyway, we're starting this residency up again at Perennial on Lockwood and Olive and Oak in Webster Groves, Missouri. And we will play there one Wednesday a month. I think it's the third Wednesday of the month starting in March, and we go through October with that usually. And yeah, we just play on the patio. It's good vibes. And my Instagram and all that. It's just JT Streiff, STREIFF on that. And I've got some music up there too. Some good blues piano. And I'm on a bunch of Nick Moss band records. So I think the last like 4 or 5 records from that group I was on. And so if you want to check those out on Spotify or whatever streaming service that you use, you can hear some of my playing there as well.
All right, sounds good. So I always like to give the person I'm interviewing the opportunity to put out their last word. So what's a message that you have that you want to share with people?
Man, just be honest. Play honest. Don't just go up there and think. I think the biggest thing that I've learned through my music and through artistry in general is that don't play what you think people want to hear. Just do what you do, and if it's honest and it's just from your heart, that's an admirable quality in anybody, and that will come through in your music or whatever it is that you're trying to use to express yourself. And I've had to learn it the hard way in many aspects of my life on how to be honest. But I think, in music for sure, just be honest, and don't get so outside of yourself or play what you think people want to hear, or you're trying to impress people. Just play from your heart, man.